Today, we're going to get into something I think a lot of us are feeling, this sense that work is just heavier than it used to be. We're going to explore why that is, and we'll introduce a new idea that might completely change the way you think about your job. So let me just ask you this straight up. Does your work feel mentally heavy? Like even when you know you're smarter and more skilled than ever before, it just feels like you're wading through mud to get things done. If you're nodding your head right now, the most important thing I can tell you is this. You are definitely not alone. Seriously, this isn't some personal weakness, it's a quiet, shared experience for so many people right now. And let's be real about what this feels like, right? It's feeling mentally wiped out, even on what should have been a good day. It's that feeling when your confidence, which you've worked so hard to build, just evaporates for no good reason. And maybe worst of all, it's that sense that you're working constantly, but your progress feels just painfully slow. Okay, but this is where it gets kind of weird. There's a real paradox at the heart of all this. Because if you think about it, we should have it easier than ever. We're more skilled, we've got all the information in the world at our fingertips, and the tools we use are incredibly powerful. Logically, work should feel lighter, not heavier. So, if it's not about us, if it's not our skills or our capability, then what on earth has actually changed? What's the missing piece here? And here it is. This is the big reveal. It's not you. It was never you. The issue isn't a lack of talent or a poor work ethic. The very nature of the work we do has fundamentally shifted right under our feet. This new reality actually has a name. It's called cognitive density. And all it means is that our work today involves way more decisions, a lot more uncertainty about what's going to happen, and everything is moving in faster and faster cycles with basically zero time to just stop and think. Let's just break that down really quickly. First, the number of decisions we have to make every single day has just exploded. Second, we're making those decisions with way less certainty about how they'll turn out. And third, the pace is just relentless, right? There are fewer and fewer moments to catch our breath. And this isn't some abstract theory. This change happening out there in the world creates a very real and very heavy internal pressure that we all carry around. I love this quote because it just nails the feeling. The mind rarely feels finished. You know, there's always one more thing. That satisfying feeling of closing all the tabs in your brain, it just doesn't happen much anymore. So what does this actually feel like day to day? Well, that mental load just kind of piles up in the background. Instead of having a clear path, you're just dealing with constant ambiguity. And a big one is when your responsibility grows, but your actual authority to make a clear call doesn't grow with it. Now, here's where it gets really damaging. When you don't have this context, what's our default response? We blame ourselves. We think, I must not be good enough, or I need to work harder. And that just starts this awful, vicious cycle. And you can see that cycle right here. It starts with a little self-doubt. So what do? We overwork to compensate. But working harder when you're not sure what to do just leads to even less clarity. And over time, all of that just chips away at the very confidence you need to do great work. So we have to break this cycle, and the way we do that is with a fundamental reframe, a whole new way of looking at this problem. This is it. This is the shift. The old belief is, work feels hard because I'm not enough. The new clarity is, work feels hard because the environment has changed. Do you see how powerful that is? It takes the problem from being about you personally and places it outside where you can actually deal with it. This is the new mantra. Difficulty is a signal, not a failure. That feeling of struggling isn't proof that you're failing. It's just a blinking light on your dashboard, telling you that the demands of the environment are off the charts right now. And just getting this, just really letting it sink in that the pressure is external, that's the first and honestly the most important step. It's what gives you the breathing room to stop the self-blame and start figuring out how to navigate this new world. And that's exactly what this series is all about. We're going to talk about how to move from that constant pressure to a feeling of poise. So here's the game plan. We're going to keep putting a name to these hidden pressures. We're going to work on ditching that unnecessary self-blame. Then we'll introduce some new, calmer ways of thinking. And through all that, we'll start to restore your confidence with this newfound clarity. The whole goal here is to get to a place where work feels manageable again, a place where you can make real progress without always feeling like you're one step away from burnout, because that is absolutely possible. So I'll just leave you with this one thought to chew on until next time. What if getting ahead isn't about more hustle or more effort? What if it's all about finding a new kind of clarity? All right. In this explainer, we're going to tackle a kind of exhaustion that's, well, it's pretty unique to our modern work life. It's totally invisible, it's incredibly draining, and it has a name: mental load. So let me just start by asking you a question. Have you ever gotten to the end of a workday, a day where you barely even moved from your chair, and yet you feel completely and utterly wiped out? I'm not talking about just being tired. I mean a deep, mental kind of exhaustion.
If you're nodding along right now, you are definitely not alone. The reason for that feeling, well, that's the core idea we're digging into. Our exhaustion isn't really physical anymore, it's mental. It's not about how many steps you took, it's about the mental marathon you just ran.
And this feeling, it's different, isn't it? It's not that good kind of sore you get after a workout. You feel totally drained, but your body isn't actually tired. You can get a full 8 hours of sleep and still wake up feeling like you're in a fog. And maybe the most frustrating part, you have no idea why. It's like you're carrying this heavy weight, but you can't see what it is. So what do we call this thing? This invisible weight? This constant, low-level hum of pressure that so many of us are carrying around all day? It's time we put a name to it. Let's actually define what we're talking about. This is it: mental load. It's all that unseen brain power it takes just to manage the never-ending flood of information, decisions, and tasks. You can think of it like being the full-time project manager for your own life and work. And it's a job that never, ever stops running in the background. And here's why it's so sneaky. Your calendar tracks your meetings, right? But it doesn't track the hours of mental prep you did beforehand. Your performance metrics show what you produced, but not the 1,000 tiny decisions that got you there. It's invisible work. And because nobody tracks it or even talks about it, we often feel like it's some kind of personal failing when we get overwhelmed by it. So where is all this load coming from? Well, it's the nonstop switching between your emails, Slack, and the actual work you're supposed to be doing. It's the constant buzz and ding of notifications, just shattering your focus. It's that vague feeling of not knowing what the real priority is. And it's all those tiny, continuous micro-decisions. Should I reply to this now? Is this important? What should I work on next? Each one seems like nothing, but together, man, they create a heavy, heavy weight. And here's the real kicker. When our work spills over into our personal thinking time, our brains never really get to clock out. They just stay on high alert, trying to solve problems in the background. And that makes real, honest-to-goodness recovery almost impossible. Your brain is still on the clock, even when you're not. Now, you might be thinking, come on, people have always worked hard. What's so different about right now? And that's a fair question. The thing is, the very nature of our work has fundamentally changed. Let's talk about that shift, because it's what makes today's mental load such a unique beast. I mean, just look at the difference here. Back then, your role was pretty clear. You had fewer big decisions to make. Information moved way slower. And when you left the office, work stayed at the office. But now, priorities can change by the hour. We're drowning in a constant flow of information, and our work is always with us, right there in our pocket. So when we feel this pressure building up, what's our first instinct? Just gotta work harder, right? Just push through it. But as we're about to see, that is a trap. Let's break down why that gut reaction, that intuitive solution, actually makes everything so much worse. This is so important to get. When your brain is already maxed out, pushing harder is like flooring the gas on an engine that's already overheating. All it does is create more mental fatigue. Working longer hours just digs you deeper into that cognitive overload. And trying to go faster when you're already scattered, that just leads to way more mistakes. Which brings us to this simple, powerful truth. You cannot brute force your way through cognitive overload. It just doesn't work. Clarity doesn't come from force. It requires a completely different approach. Okay, so if forcing it is out, then what's the answer? Well, our final section is all about the solution. It's about making a really powerful mental shift, a reframe to clarity. It's about moving from just trying to endure the overload to actively and intentionally managing it. So this new mindset really comes down to 4 steps. First, you have to acknowledge that mental load is real, and it's something you have to manage, not just a weakness you should ignore. Second, start prioritizing the quality of your thinking, not just the sheer volume of stuff you get done. Third, you have to treat focus like a core professional skill when you need to practice and develop. And finally, and this is a big one, understand this: energy follows clarity. The second you get clear on what really matters, your energy starts to come back.
And when you make this shift, wow, the results are pretty amazing. Your confidence comes back because you're not lost in that fog anymore. Making decisions suddenly feels easier. Your work actually feels lighter. And best of all, your creativity, which is always the first thing to disappear when you're overloaded, it starts to come back.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? It's this. In today's chaotic world of work, being calm is a professional advantage. Seriously, reducing your own mental noise isn't just some wellness fad. It's a strategic edge that makes you way more effective and lets you do your absolute best work. But what happens when we don't manage this overload? It doesn't just impact our work, It fundamentally changes how we experience our own lives. And that's something we're going to dig into in our next explainer.
All right, let's dive into a feeling that a lot of seasoned pros know all too well. It's that moment when all your hard-won experience suddenly starts to feel less like a superpower and more like, well, a burden. So let's get into why that happens. It's a really frustrating paradox, isn't it? You've put in the years, you've climbed the ladder, you've seen pretty much everything, and yet making big decisions somehow feels harder now than it did 10 years ago. So why does having more experience sometimes feel like less of an advantage? That is the big question we're going to unpack today.
We're calling this the confidence paradox. It's that internal fight between what you know to be true, that you're skilled and experienced, and this nagging feeling of insecurity that just doesn't seem to make any sense.
I mean, just look at this. This probably feels familiar, right? You have decades of professional experience to your name, but your confidence, it feels shaky, unstable. Every decision feels like it carries the weight of the world. And all of that creates this quiet, creeping insecurity that can be really tough to deal with. So what's actually going on here? Well, the key thing to understand is that it's not you. It's the work itself that's changed. The professional ground has literally shifted beneath our feet, and that changes what experience even means anymore. This slide just lays it out so clearly. Think about it. In a stable world, the world where many of us started our careers, experience was all about pattern recognition. You saw a problem, you knew the answer because you'd seen it before. It made things predictable. But today, we live in a dynamic world. Patterns change in the blink of an eye. The context is constantly shifting, and most big decisions have no real precedent. Your experience is still incredibly valuable, but its whole job has changed.
And here's the most important takeaway. If you're feeling this way, it is not a personal failure. It's a totally normal response to a changing environment. This isn't about you losing your edge, not at all. It's about the game itself changing.
A lot of us have this deep-seated fear of something called skill decay. The idea that if we're not constantly learning the newest thing, our knowledge and our skills just kind of wither away. It's a huge source of anxiety for so many people. So let's just be crystal clear. For the vast majority of experienced professionals feeling this insecurity, this is not what's happening. Your skills have not just evaporated into thin air.
No, these are the real reasons. Your capability is still there, but the environment has evolved. And as you've gotten more senior, your responsibility has exploded. The amount of pure ambiguity you have to deal with every day has expanded, and those old support structures, they've kind of shrunk. On top of all that, the expectations everyone has of you have silently gone through the roof. It's the perfect storm for feeling completely overwhelmed.
Okay, so how do we deal with this? Well, it takes a really powerful mental shift. We have to move away from needing certainty and instead start embracing wisdom. This is the reframe that changes everything.
When our confidence takes a hit, our first instincts can actually lead us down the wrong path. We try to control every little detail. We put off making decisions. We over-prepare for every possible outcome. And worst of all, we start to second-guess the very instincts that got us here in the first place. These are just defensive moves, and they don't work.
The right reframe is all about changing how you measure success internally. See, the old model was about recall, having the answer. The new model is about judgment, knowing how to find the answer. It's about letting go of that need for certainty and embracing wisdom, which is knowing how to act without certainty. And this leads to a whole new kind of confidence. It's not loud and flashy. It's quiet, it's thoughtful, and it is so much more durable. So, what does this actually look like day to day? Well, strong professionals today, they accept that uncertainty is the new normal. They actually slow down to make better decisions, instead of speeding up. They ask better, deeper questions. And this is the big one. They learn to trust their thinking process, not just their memory of what worked before.
If there is one thing you take away today,
please let it be this. Your experience evolves. It doesn't expire. It is not obsolete. Its whole purpose has just shifted from giving you ready-made answers to giving you the wisdom to navigate questions that nobody has ever had to ask before.
And ultimately, this is the choice that every experienced professional has to make. You can adapt, and you can regain your confidence on new, more solid ground, or you can stay stuck, constantly comparing yourself and your performance to a world that just doesn't exist anymore.
Thinking about it this way is incredibly free, but it also brings up a fascinating new question, doesn't it? If our experience isn't the problem, then what else is getting in our way? And that feels like the perfect place to leave it for now.
You know that feeling? You grind out a 10-hour day. Your to-do list is a mile long, but when you finally shut your laptop, you just feel empty, like you didn't actually accomplish anything that really mattered. Well, you're definitely not alone. So let's get into why this happens and how we can find our way back to making a real meaningful impact. So I want you to start by asking yourself this one simple question. Just be honest with yourself for a second. Are you busy or are you effective? Because believe me, in the world we work in today, those two things are often not the same at all. I mean, does this look familiar? Your calendar is just a wall of back-to-back meetings. Your inbox is a disaster. The hours just keep piling up. But at the end of the week, there's this weird, nagging feeling that you didn't really get anywhere. Your progress is, well, it's kind of fuzzy, right? Now listen, this isn't some personal failure on your part. It's actually a problem with the system itself. So let's pull back the curtain on this illusion of progress and figure out why our modern work culture has us all chasing activity instead of actual achievement. Okay, this is the absolute core of the problem. Busyness is visible. You know, sending a bunch of emails, showing up to meetings, shuffling tasks around, it looks like you're working hard. And frankly, a lot of workplaces reward that motion. But impact, that's a whole different game. It's subtle, it's the quiet result that shows up way after the work is done. It's all about the outcome, not the frantic activity. So why does this happen? Well, it's pretty simple. We're drowning in inputs. Slack, email, you name it. We're told that everything is a top priority, which really means that nothing is. We get interrupted constantly, which completely shatters our focus, and we get almost zero time to just sit and think. The one thing you need to do to solve hard problems. It's basically the perfect storm for creating motion without any meaning. And staying on this hamster wheel of busyness, it has a real cost. It's not just about feeling a little unfulfilled. The true price you pay is much, much higher than you think. So what are the real costs? Well, they're pretty devastating, actually. First, you're staring down the barrel of burnout. Your thinking gets shallow because you're only ever reacting. You're never actually strategizing. Over time, that chips away at your professional confidence, and ultimately, you create way less value for your company and for your own career in the long run. And this right here is why all those productivity hacks you read about just fall flat. You know, the inbox zero tricks, the fancy new apps. They're all designed to help you do more stuff faster. They're obsessed with speed, but they completely ignore the most important part of the equation, the actual quality of your thinking. They just assume you're already working on the right things. So this brings us to the big idea. We need a fundamental reframe of how we think about this. We have got to shift our entire focus away from the sheer volume of work we do and onto the value of the work we produce. And here it is, the new definition of productivity. Are you ready? It's just 2 words, meaningful progress. That's it. It's not about how many tasks you ticked off, it's not about how fast you answered an email, and it's definitely not about how busy you look. It is simply about making real, tangible progress on the things that actually move the needle. And what does that feel like in the real world? Well, it feels like making fewer decisions, but having them be better ones. It's seeing clear, tangible outcomes from your work. It's getting that amazing sense of mental closure when you truly finish something important. And all of that lets you work at a sustainable, consistent pace instead of just sprinting toward burnout. Okay, so that's the big mindset shift. But talk is cheap, right? How do we actually do it? Let's walk through an actionable path that you can start on today. People who make a huge impact just operate differently. First, they are absolutely ruthless about prioritization. They know the 1 or 2 things that really matter and ignore the rest. Second, they make fewer commitments because they know that every time you say yes to something unimportant, you're saying no to something that is. They build strong boundaries to protect their time, and they are super intentional about carving out big blocks of time for deep, focused work. And this really shows you the result of that approach. On one side, you have the merely busy. They're putting in a ton of effort, but getting very little impact. And on the other side, you have the truly effective. They're using focused effort to get massive impact. And in our crazy, distracted world, the gap between these two groups is just getting wider and wider every single day. So, look, escaping this busyness trap isn't just about feeling better about your work. It is a strategic imperative. The ability to separate activity from achievement and to focus on what creates real value, that is one of the biggest competitive advantages you can possibly build for yourself right now. And that leaves us with one final critical thought. If making fewer, better decisions is the absolute heart of creating impact, then the next question you have to ask yourself is this: how strong are your decisions? And what can you do to make them even better? That's a topic for another day.
Okay, let's talk about something that's probably draining your energy right now, even if you don't fully realize it. It's this silent force that just eats away at your focus, day in and day out. We're talking about decision fatigue.
So let me ask you something. Just take a second and think. How many choices have you already made today? Seriously, from hitting the snooze button to what you wore, what you had for breakfast, then you get to work and it's which email to open first, which task to tackle, and that's all before you even get to the big stuff. It's a lot, right? The number is probably way higher than you think.
And that's the thing. It's not a trickle. It's a flood, a constant stream of choices. You got the big, heavy decisions, but they're all mixed in with 1,000 tiny ones. And they just keep coming. There's almost no time to catch your breath, to mentally recover. That relentless pace, that's the real problem here.
Well, there's a name for that feeling. It's called decision fatigue, and it's a real measurable thing. It just means that the quality of your decisions goes down, way down, after you've been making a bunch of them for a while. It's kind of simple, really. The more you decide, the worse you get at deciding.
Okay, here's a great way to picture this. Think of your brain power, your thinking energy, like a bank account. Let's call it your cognitive budget. And every single choice you make, even the tiny little ones, is a withdrawal, a little debit from your mental account.
So why do these little withdrawals add up so fast? Well, for one, every choice takes up a bit of your focused attention. And if there's any uncertainty involved, boom, that adds a layer of stress. But here's the kicker. Our brains hate unfinished business. They're wired to find an answer, get closure, and move on. The problem is, modern work is basically a giant collection of open loops, right? And that is just exhausting.
You know, it wasn't always like this. If you look back, the whole decision-making landscape was totally different. You had fewer choices, period. And if you got stuck, there was a clear chain of command, a way to escalate. But today, oh man, it's a fire hose of choices, it's all on your shoulders, and you often feel the impact of that choice immediately.
And all this fatigue, it has a pretty nasty hidden impact. You start to hesitate more. Then that hesitation turns into overthinking, even for simple stuff. And where does that lead? To feeling totally wiped out, emotionally drained. It's a vicious cycle that just makes you less and less effective.
And it's no surprise that this starts to chip away at your confidence. I mean, how could it not? You've got all these unresolved decisions bouncing around in your head. Zero time to actually think things through, and this nagging fear of, what if I mess this up? It's a recipe for mental overload. And pretty soon, you start to second-guess everything.
Okay, so this is where we need to stop and kind of flip the script. We've been taught that being productive means being busy, making tons of decisions, moving fast. But that's just not true. The real key here is that the quality of your decisions is infinitely more important than the quantity.
So the goal isn't to become a decision-making machine, churning out choices one after another. No way. The real goal is to make the right decisions better. It's about protecting your mental space so you have the clarity you need for the choices that actually matter. That's how you break the cycle.
All right, so how do we actually do that? How do we protect our thinking energy? Let's get practical and look at how the sharpest professionals handled this exact problem.
It really comes down to a 4-part framework. First up, simplify. Just get rid of choices you don't need to make. Think of Steve Jobs with his black turtleneck, right? He didn't want to waste a single drop of brain power on what to wear. Second, delay. Not every decision needs to be made right now. If it's not critical, push it. Third, build frameworks. For the decisions you have to make over and over, create a system. That way, you're not reinventing the wheel every time.
And last, but maybe most important, protect your energy. Schedule your big, important thinking for when you're fresh, usually in the morning, not when you're running on fumes at the end of the day.
Okay, so you do all this. What's the payoff? What's the big advantage of having a calmer, more focused mind?
Well, the first thing you'll notice, and others will too, is a sense of calm, a calm presence. When your mind is in a chaotic mess of a dozen different choices, you stop being so reactive. You're more centered. You project this quiet confidence that people can't help but notice. The next advantage is something that sounds like a paradox. You actually get to clarity faster. I know, it sounds weird, right? Make fewer decisions to get answers faster, but it's absolutely true. When you clear out all the mental clutter, the signal from what's truly important comes through loud and clear.
And when you put those two things together, that calm presence and that faster clarity, what you get is a much stronger leadership signal. Think about it. The best leaders are calm under pressure, they find clarity in chaos, and they focus on what really matters. It sends a powerful message. You can handle complexity without getting overwhelmed.
And if we had to boil this all down to one single idea, it would be this. Long-term clarity always beats short-term speed. Our world is obsessed with faster, more. But the real wins, the lasting progress, that comes from having a clear mind that can make a few really high-quality decisions.
And speaking of that pressure to be fast, that's actually a perfect lead-in to what we're talking about next time. We're going to dive into how this idea of false urgency just pours gasoline on the fire of decision fatigue. You won't want to miss it.
All right, let's get into it. Today we're tackling a feeling that I think almost everyone knows. It's this weird paradox of being totally swamped with urgent tasks all day long, but then you get to the end of the day and feel like you didn't actually do anything meaningful. We're going to break down why that happens and, way more importantly, what you can actually do about it. You know the day I'm talking about, right? You are just racing from one thing to the next, your inbox is a disaster, your phone won't stop buzzing, and by the time you're done, you are completely wiped out. But when you try to think back, what did I actually get done today? You can't really name one single important thing. It's that awful hamster wheel feeling. You're running, you're busy, but you're not getting anywhere. So where on earth does this feeling come from? It's not just in our heads. To figure this out, we need to diagnose the problem. And we're going to call it the tyranny of now. This state of constant, almost manufactured urgency that's pretty much taken over the way we work. And this probably sounds really familiar, right? Suddenly, everything is labeled as important. A tiny question from a coworker gets the same weight as a massive project deadline. And of course, every single one of these important things is needed now. When you don't have any real prioritization, your whole day just becomes a fire drill. You're jumping between 10 different things, you're not finishing any of them, and you end the day with a giant list of things you only got halfway through. Okay, but how did we even get to this point? I want to be really clear. This is not some personal failure on your part. There are some really powerful forces out there that created this situation. So let's look at how this whole culture of urgency managed to basically hack our work lives.
It was kind of a perfect storm, really. First, you get communication tools like Slack and Teams that make everything instantaneous. That creates an expectation that you're always available. At the same time, companies got flatter, which sounds good, but it also means that pretty much anyone can drop an urgent request right on your lap. You mix that with an always-on culture, where work bleeds into nights and weekends, and you get the last piece of the puzzle, a deep, nagging fear of being the person who slows things down. Nobody wants to be the bottleneck, so what do? We just try to run fast.
And the cost of this, man, it's huge. Just look at this. As our anxiety shoots up and our ability to focus just collapses, look at what gets squeezed out: meaning and satisfaction. It's literally impossible to feel a sense of purpose in your work when you're just a machine reacting to notifications. Real meaning, that needs space, it needs reflection, it needs to connect to a bigger goal. And urgency is the enemy of all of that. So here's the big question. If we know it's so bad for us, why do we keep doing it? Why do we instinctively run towards the fire instead of away from it? Well, the answer lies in something we can call the urgency trap. See, urgency feels necessary for some really tempting reasons. For one, it lets us avoid the discomfort of starting a really big, hard project. It's a great way to mask the fact that maybe we don't have clear priorities. And let's be honest, it creates this feeling of false momentum. It feels like we're being productive, but it's a total trap. Because while we're chasing that busy feeling, any chance for deep, meaningful work disappears. Our creativity takes a nosedive, our judgment gets worse, and the final stop on that train is, you guessed it, burnout. To get out of this trap, we have to make a pretty fundamental shift in our mindset. And it's captured perfectly by this one simple but really powerful idea. Urgency is a signal, not a rule.
You know, just thinking about that idea, it opens up a totally new way of doing things. A path that isn't about just reacting all the time, but about acting with real intention. Let's talk about the power of deliberate depth.
This reframe is everything. First, we start treating urgency as just a piece of data. That ping on your screen, it's a signal, not a command. Then we have to accept that finding meaning in our work actually requires space. It doesn't come from a frenzy of activity. And when you do that, you can start to see that true, lasting value, it comes from deep, thoughtful work, not just a bunch of shallow reactions.
So how do we actually do this? Well, it all starts with step one. You have to question the urgency. When a request comes flying in, just pause and ask, why now? What actually happens if this waits until tomorrow? Just asking that simple question lets you move to step two, protect your focus. You can block out time for what really matters, which naturally leads to step three, slowing down the big decisions so you can think clearly. And all of that builds up to the final, most important step, deliberately choosing to go deep on the work that creates real, lasting value.
And I'm telling you, when you start building these habits, the rewards they're profound. Not just for your career, but for your own sanity. This is what we call the calm professional's advantage. And the results really do speak for themselves. When you prioritize thoughtful work, you get better outcomes. The quality of what you do goes way up. That, in turn, builds you a stronger reputation. You become the person known for excellence, not just for being fast. And maybe most importantly, this creates a way to perform at a high level that's actually sustainable, not just a series of sprints that lead to a crash. But honestly, the external rewards are only half the story. The real prize here is the shift that happens inside. That constant buzzing chaos in your head, it gets replaced by a sense of calm control. Your confidence isn't so shaky anymore. And this is the whole point. Your work starts to feel meaningful again because you are finally in the driver's seat, choosing where to invest your energy. So as we wrap this up, I want to leave you with one last question to really think about. What fear sits beneath your urgency? Is it the fear that people will think you're not productive? The fear of missing out on something? Or maybe it's the fear of being seen as replaceable. We're actually going to dive deep into that specific anxiety in our next explainer.
You know that feeling. It's not some big dramatic panic attack. It's more of a quiet hum in the back of your mind. A little bit of anxiety about your career, about your value, in a world that just feels like it's changing on a daily basis. Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down right now. And really, it all just boils down to this one single question. A question we don't often say out loud. Will I still matter? It's not about if you're good at your job today. It's about whether the skills you've worked so hard to build will even be necessary tomorrow.
And hey, if you're sitting there nodding your head right now, I want you to know, you are so far from being alone. This feeling, this anxiety, is something so many of us are dealing with. Just admitting that, just saying, yep, I feel that, is the first most important step.
Okay, so let's dig into this. Let's really get to the bottom of it, because if we're going to move past this fear, we first have to understand where in the world it's coming from.
I mean, it's coming from everywhere, right? You can't open a browser without seeing another headline about some new AI that can do your job. We're just surrounded by these stories about automation, everything is moving at a dizzying speed, and nobody can give you a straight answer about what the future of work actually looks like. It's totally natural to feel a little unmoored by all of it.
But here's the thing that's really interesting, and maybe a little counterintuitive. You'd think the people who are struggling would feel this the most, right? But actually, it's often the high performers, the people who are absolutely crushing it in their fields, who feel this anxiety the most intensely.
And it kind of makes sense when you think about it. If you're a high performer, that bar just keeps getting higher and higher. You're constantly looking at what others are doing. The good feeling you get from mastering something new seems to fade faster than it used to. And that pressure to stay ahead of the curve is just relentless. Your value is part of your identity, so any threat to that value feels incredibly personal.
So we feel this anxiety, and our first instinct is to do something. But a lot of the time, that instinct pushes us onto what you could call an anxiety-driven treadmill. We start running, but we're not actually getting anywhere.
Sound familiar? You start working crazy hours just to feel like you're proving your worth. You start tool chasing, frantically trying to learn every new piece of software that pops up. You're learning, sure, but it's not driven by curiosity. It's driven by the fear of being left behind. And let me tell you, that is an exhausting way to live, and it doesn't fix the root problem.
So, this is the turning point. This is where we stop. It's where we realize the solution isn't to run faster on that treadmill. The solution is to get off it completely by totally redefining where our real, lasting value comes from.
This right here, this is the whole game. We have to get really clear on what's replaceable versus what's indispensable. Simple tasks, just executing on a plan, following instructions. Look, that stuff is going to be automated. But human judgment in a messy, complex situation, understanding the subtle context of a problem, taking real, ultimate responsibility for the outcome, that is where we shine. That is what can't be replaced.
I really want you to let that sink in. Your value is not disappearing. It's just moving. It's shifting up. It's moving from the doing to the thinking. It's less about the hands on the keyboard and more about the mind that directs them.
And you know what? This is actually great news because it means you're in control. This isn't something that just happens to you. You can actively, intentionally choose to build this indispensable mind. So how do we do it? Here's the roadmap. It's a clear 3-step plan that gets you off the treadmill. Forget chasing the latest app for a second. Instead, you actively seek out messy, complex problems to sharpen your judgment. You intentionally practice zooming out to see the bigger picture, to understand the context. And you systematically look back at your decisions, the good and the bad, to get better over time. This is the work. This is the work no machine is ever going to do for you.
And when you start making this shift, when you focus more on thinking and less on just doing, something really amazing starts to happen. It's not just about your career, it's about your whole state of mind. You start to find what we'll call the confidence of calm.
And man, what a feeling that is. That frantic energy just melts away. That quiet, nagging fear in the back of your mind gets a whole lot quieter because you know what you're building is solid. Your confidence comes back, but this time it's rooted in something real. And growing your skills starts to feel exciting and intentional again, instead of like you're just desperately trying to keep your head above water. This really puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? In a world that is only getting louder and more chaotic, the calm thinker is the one who cuts through the noise. The noise-driven worker reacts to every email, every notification, every new trend. The calm thinker focuses on what's truly important and builds skills that are going to last for years. One of them gets lost in the crowd. The other one stands out with a clarity that is impossible to ignore.
Which of course brings us to the most important question of all. This shift is powerful. It gives you an undeniable edge, but it all comes down to your ability to think clearly when everything around you is chaos. And that calm, that focus, it's not something you're born with. It's a skill. And learning that skill is what it's all about.
Let's talk about a skill that honestly separates the good from the truly great in any tough field: staying calm under pressure. But here's the thing. This isn't about your personality. We're talking about a strategic system you can actually build. Think of it like an architecture for calm that can become your secret weapon at work. So let's get into it. You've seen this, right? Picture two people, both super talented, both facing the exact same crazy deadline. One of them stays focused, makes sharp decisions, and just handles it. The other one, they get overwhelmed, start making mistakes, and basically fall apart. The pressure was identical. So what gives? Why the completely different reactions? That is the question we are going to unpack right now. And here's our roadmap. We'll start with that pressure paradox. Then we're going to completely redefine what we think calm even is. We'll look at the anatomy of burnout, lay out a blueprint for your own calm architecture, and finally show you why this is one of the biggest professional advantages you can ever have. Okay, so let's dig into this paradox first. When you see someone thrive while another person collapses, your first thought is probably, well, that person is just tougher, or maybe they're just built differently. But that's a huge misunderstanding of what's actually happening under the hood. And this right here, this is where we get it wrong. The myth is that being calm means you're tough, you have thick skin, or maybe you're just detached from it all. But the truth? It's the complete opposite. Real, lasting calm doesn't come from ignoring the chaos. It comes from understanding it. It's not about being disconnected. It's about having crystal clear clarity right in the middle of the storm. And that brings us to the most important idea in this whole explainer. If you want to master pressure, you have to totally reframe your definition of calm. It's not some passive, relaxed state you just hope for. It's an active state of mind that you build on purpose.
So here it is. This is the new definition. Calm is simply a state of clarity. And when you have clarity, when you know what's going on, what's important, and what to do next, that overwhelming feeling of fear just shrinks. The stress that comes from uncertainty gets replaced by structure. So calm isn't about the absence of stress, it's the presence of clarity that lets you make good decisions. But let's be real. Achieving that clarity is way easier said than done. There are some powerful forces in our work lives that are actively pushing against it, driving us straight towards burnout. You have to understand these forces before you can fight back. And here they are, the enemies of calm. You've got that feeling of constant urgency, where everything feels like a fire that needs to be put out right now. You have poor boundaries, where work bleeds into every corner of your life. Then there's just sheer mental overload. But look at that last one, lack of clarity. That's the one that ties it all together. It's the fuel for the burnout fire. Okay, so if a lack of clarity is the problem, then building a structure for clarity has to be the solution. This is about engineering the conditions for calm, not just hoping it shows up. So let's look at the actual blueprint for how you build this thing. Here it is, your 4-step blueprint. Number 1, establish brutally clear priorities. You have to know the 1 or 2 things that actually move the needle today. Second, use decision frameworks, simple tools to help you make choices fast without draining your brain power. Third, and this is a big one, you can't skip it. You have to schedule time to just think. Block it out on your calendar. And fourth, develop the emotional awareness to notice when you're starting to get reactive so you can hit pause and get back to a structured approach. Now, when you start putting this architecture into practice, the benefits are huge. And they go way beyond just feeling less stressed. This system of calm gives you a real, tangible, professional advantage that just keeps growing throughout your career. I mean, look at these outcomes. They're undeniable. You become a better leader, period. People are drawn to a steady hand in a crisis. You make way better decisions because you're working from a place of clarity, not panic. You also protect your own health in the long run. And maybe most importantly, your team learns they can trust you. They know you're the stable one when things get chaotic. And this chart really tells the whole story. The reality is almost nobody does this. The vast majority of people, something like 90%, just react to pressure. They're on the defensive. Only a tiny fraction, maybe 10%, have actually built the system to sustain their calm. If you can get into that 10%, you're not just a little bit better, you're playing a completely different game. And really, it all boils down to this. In a world that is only getting faster and more demanding, your ability to maintain clarity, your calm, isn't a soft skill anymore. It is your single biggest competitive edge. But, you know, the most powerful result isn't something you can put on a resume. It's an internal shift. When you operate from this calm architecture, work starts to feel manageable again. Your confidence, which used to be all over the place, it stabilizes. And once that happens, your professional growth, which probably stalled out from burnout, can finally start again. So we'll end with this. The pressure of our work, the constant demands, the speed of everything, that's not going away. That's the new normal. The only thing you can actually control is how you respond to it. So the question for you is, are you going to keep reacting or are you going to start building?
Let's talk about something that's happened to pretty much all of us. It's this massive, silent shift in how we work. Technology completely rewrote the rulebook, and it feels like it happened without any of us getting the memo.
I mean, you know that feeling, right? It's like you showed up to play a game of checkers, a game you know really well, and suddenly everyone else is playing 3D chess at lightning speed on the very same board. You're not crazy. Something really did change, and it changed fast.
And think about it. When did you ever get a training course on how to handle the fire hose of information from Slack or Teams? Yeah, me neither. It just appeared.
There's no gentle on-ramp. One day you could wait for a reply, and the next it was all about instant responses. The switch was just flipped.
And that's what we were left with, weren't we? A whole new set of unwritten rules, unspoken expectations about how fast we should be, how available we have to be, and how much we're supposed to get done.
So let's break down what really shifted under the hood. Well, first, the speed of feedback went from, days or hours to literally seconds. At the same time, the sheer volume of information we're expected to process just exploded. And of course, that meant the expectations for our output, what we could do and how fast, went through the roof.
And you can really see the whiplash here. We used to live in a world of scheduled meetings, of waiting for decisions, of having pretty clear boundaries between work and life. Now, it's a reality of constant pings, instant feedback, and this always-on culture. The old playbook is basically useless.
Now, it is so easy to point the finger, isn't it? It's easy to blame Slack, to blame email, to blame the notifications for all this stress. But what if that's not the real story? What if technology isn't the villain we think it is?
This is the absolute key to understanding everything. Technology didn't actually break our old ways of working. What it did was shine a massive, high-powered spotlight on the weaknesses that were already there all along.
This leads us to a really powerful idea, the amplifier effect. Just think of technology as a neutral tool, like a giant megaphone. It doesn't have an opinion. It just takes whatever you give it, good, bad, smart, messy, and makes it a whole lot bigger and louder for everyone to see.
And here's what that looks like in practice. If you put clear, structured thinking into the system, technology amplifies it into incredible, brilliant ideas that can spread everywhere. But if the input is fuzzy, disorganized, poor thinking, well, you get chaos. You get widespread confusion, just amplified.
And once you see that, you realize you're standing at a fork in the road. It's not about just using the tech anymore. It's about being incredibly intentional about what we're feeding into the amplifier. We are making that choice every single day with every message we send.
And the two paths are really, really different. The people who adapt, who focus on the quality of their thinking before they use the tools, they are going to thrive. They're going to have a huge competitive edge. But those who resist, who just try to work faster using the old rules, they're going to struggle. They're going to get buried by the demands and, frankly, get left behind.
This right here is the whole game. The new way to win isn't about being the fastest person to reply to an email. It's not about working more hours. The real competitive advantage, the skill that matters most now, is how well you think before you ever click a button.
So what does thinking better even mean? Well, it really comes down to three things. Number one is thinking quality. How clear and structured are your ideas? Number two is judgment. Can you cut through all the noise and make a good call? And number three is integration. Are you able to connect all the random dots and see the big picture? You know, just getting this concept can be a huge weight off your shoulders. When you understand what's really going on, you stop feeling like a victim of your inbox and you start to feel back in control. That kind of clarity is maybe the best weapon we have against workplace anxiety.
So if you remember just one thing from all of this, let it be this. In this new world, adapting your thinking is always going to be more powerful than just increasing your speed. Quality of thought wins out over speed of response every single time.
Which of course brings us to the final question. And this one is for you. Now you see the amplifier for what it is. You know it's taking whatever you give it and broadcasting it to the world. So my question is, what are you going to choose to magnify?
All right, we've been on a real journey together, haven't we? And in this final explainer, we're going to tie it all together. We've talked a lot about why work feels so different these days. Today is all about the destination, finding a way of working that feels clear, confident, and, actually manageable. Let's find that path. So let me just start by asking a question that I bet is going to hit home for a lot of you. Does modern work just feel impossibly difficult sometimes? Like you're on a treadmill that's going a little too fast and you can't find the off switch. If you've felt that overwhelm, that exhaustion, you're not crazy. And you're definitely not alone. And look, if there is one single thing you take away from this entire series, please let it be this. It's not you. This isn't some kind of personal failure. The game itself has changed. The entire nature of work has been rewritten. And the old rule book, it's pretty much useless now. Just getting that is the first huge step to getting back in the driver's seat. So let's start right there by really acknowledging this shift. You have to, right? Because you can't navigate a new landscape with an old map. Realizing the ground has literally moved under our feet is what allows us to stop, look around, and find a new way forward.
So what does this all mean for you right now? Well, first off, it means you are not behind. I know it feels that way, but that feeling is just a symptom of the change. It's not a true measure of you. Second, you're adjusting. This is a massive transition, and that takes real energy. And maybe most important of all, growth isn't just possible, it's pretty much a given once you start playing by the new rules. Okay, so if the old rules are out, what are the new ones? This is all about finding your new compass. It's about shifting your mindset away from those old, broken ideas of success and focusing on what actually works today.
And this, right here, this really gets to the heart of it.
We're moving away from that old obsession with just pure speed, endless volume, and that whole hustle culture that just leads to burnout. The new way, the effective way, is all about clarity of thought, the quality of your judgment, and finding a sustainable pace. It's the big shift from just being busy to actually being effective.
So how do you actually do this? Well, the people who are really winning at this new game do a few things differently. First, they actively manage their mental load. They don't just let all the chaos flood in. Second, they protect their time for deep thinking like it's gold. And third, they make a conscious choice to go for depth over just shallow, reactive busy work. These aren't just habits, they are flat-out strategies. And this is where it gets really good. Because adopting these new rules, it isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving. The rewards you get from making this shift are huge, and they compound over time in ways that can totally change your career. You know, the first thing that happens is your confidence just comes roaring back. Seriously, when you stop measuring yourself by the impossible goal of getting everything done and start focusing on the quality of your work, you start to see your own value again. You feel competent, you feel in control. And right on the heels of that control, something else happens. That constant low-level anxiety that just hums in the background of modern work. It starts to fade away. Clarity is the enemy of chaos, and having a clear plan is the best medicine for that feeling of being overwhelmed.
And finally, when you're not just constantly putting out fires and reacting to everything, something incredible happens. A real sense of direction starts to emerge. You begin making choices based on what you want, not just what the next email demands. Your path forward actually becomes your own.
Now let's zoom out, because these immediate wins, they create incredible momentum. A career that's built on good judgment and deep work, its value compounds over time. That feeling of calm focus, it becomes your new normal, which makes you even more effective. And the trust you build with people and with yourself, it compounds into a reputation that just opens doors. In this new world, you can really see three groups of people forming. You've got a small group that panics and burns out. Then you have a really big group that just tries to get by, without really adapting. But then, there's this small, powerful group that gets the new rules and changes their approach. And the advantage they get, it's not just a little bit bigger, it's massive. So, all of this brings us to the most important part of all, your path forward. This isn't really the end of our series. Think of it more as the beginning of your new, more intentional way of working. This is where your journey really gets going. And if you remember just one thing from our time together, I hope it's this. That feeling of difficulty, it's not a sign that you're failing. Not at all. It's just a signal. It's a sign from the world that it's time to evolve. It's an invitation to grow.
And the heart of that evolution, the whole thing, really boils down to one word: clarity. This was never about working harder or faster. It's about working smarter. Clarity is the master key. It's what unlocks confidence, it's what restores calm, and it's what makes work feel manageable again.
You have the framework now. You see why things have changed, and you know the new rules to win. You now have the clarity to move forward. And with that clarity, you're not just ready for today's challenges, you are ready to evolve and master the incredible opportunities of tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey.